The rest stop on mile 87. There were 4 cars in the lot when I pulled in. When I came out, there were 5. I'd been driving the I-40 corridor for about 6 years when this happened, hauling freight between Memphis and Little Rock 3 times a week. You get to know the route like the back of your hand. Every exit, every truck stop, every place where the speed traps hide. Mile 87 had a rest stop I'd used maybe 100 times before. Nothing special. Vending machines, bathroom block, picnic tables under a concrete shelter. The kind of place that's always empty except for the occasional family RV or someone walking their dog. It was a Tuesday night, late October. I'd left Memphis around 9, planning to push through to Little Rock without stopping, but my lower back had other ideas. By the time I hit mile 87, I needed to stretch my legs and take a walk. The lot was mostly empty when I pulled in. Just a handful of cars scattered around. I remember counting them out of habit. A silver sedan near the entrance. A white SUV by the vending machines. 2 sedans parked close together near the far end. 4 total. I parked my rig along the truck section, killed the engine, and climbed down. The air had that crisp fall bite to it, and the lot was lit by those tall orange sodium lights that make everything look sickly and washed out. I did a few stretches by the cab, then headed toward the bathroom block, my boots echoing on the asphalt. That's when I noticed the first odd thing. The white SUV I'd seen by the vending machines, it was running. Engine on, headlights off, just idling there in the middle of the lot. I could see the exhaust puffing out in little clouds, but I couldn't see anyone inside. The windows were tinted, but not so dark that you couldn't make out a silhouette if someone was sitting there. I figured maybe someone had left it running while they used the restroom. People do that. I went into the bathroom, used the urinal, washed my hands. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead with that electric hum that always sounds too loud in empty places. When I came back out, I walked the perimeter of the lot, like I usually did, just to get the blood flowing again before the next 3-hour stretch. That's when I noticed the second thing, the silver sedan that had been near the entrance when I pulled in. It had moved. It was now parked on the opposite side of the lot, facing my truck. I stopped walking and stared at it for a second. I hadn't heard an engine start, hadn't seen headlights sweep across the lot, but it had definitely moved. I told myself I'd miscounted, that maybe it wasn't the same car, except it was. Same make, same color, same dent in the front bumper I'd noticed when I drove past it. The white SUV was still idling in the same spot. I kept walking, but slower now, paying attention. The 2 sedans at the far end hadn't moved. I glanced back toward my truck, checking the distance, maybe 70 yards. The rest stop was built in a wide loop, bathroom block in the center, parking spaces radiating out like spokes. There were no other buildings, no gas station, just the lot, the bathrooms, and a wall of dark trees beyond the fence. I was about halfway back to my truck when I heard it. A car door. Not a slam, just the soft click-thunk of a door closing carefully, like someone didn't want to make noise. I turned around. All 4 cars were still there, windows dark, no one moving. And then I recounted 1 silver sedan, 1 white SUV, 2 dark sedans at the far end, and 1 more car, a red hatchback parked in a spot I'd walked right past not 2 minutes ago. I would have seen it. But now, it was just there, like it had always been. My heart started doing that thing where it doesn't beat faster, just harder. I scanned the lot, looking for people. There was no one. Not by the bathrooms, not by the vending machines, not walking between the cars. The whole place was silent, except for the hum of the white SUV and the buzz of the overhead lights. I started walking faster toward my truck. Not running. I didn't want to look scared, but moving with purpose. I kept my eyes forward, but watched the cars in my peripheral vision, waiting for a door to open, for headlights to flip on, for something. Nothing moved. I reached my truck, climbed up into the cab, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking a little as I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I'd never been so happy to hear that sound. I pulled out of the spot, swung around the loop, and headed toward the exit. That's when all 5 cars turned their headlights on at once. Not their engines, just the lights. 5 pairs of bright white beams cutting through the dark, all pointed in different directions, all perfectly still. I could see them in my mirrors as I accelerated onto the ramp, just sitting there, lit up, not moving. I didn't stop driving until I hit Little Rock. The next week, I came through the same route. I told myself I wouldn't stop at mile 87, but when I got close, I slowed down just to see. The rest stop looked normal. A couple of RVs, a family at the picnic tables. I kept driving, but about a mile past it, I checked my mirrors. There was a red hatchback behind me. Same make, same model. It followed me for 10 miles before it finally exited. I don't use that rest stop anymore. I hold it until mile 104 now, even if my back's killing me. And I don't count cars in parking lots, because sometimes they count you bad. I saw the same rig at 3 different locations. The truck that followed me home, truck stops 200 meters apart. Same driver, same wave. I've been an independent hauler for about 8 years, mostly running loads between Dallas and Phoenix. It's a lonely job, but I like it that way. No boss breathing down my neck, no office politics. Just me on the road. You see the same faces sometimes at the truck stops. Other regulars, lot lizards, the cashiers who work the graveyard shift. You nod, maybe exchange a few words about weather or traffic. Then you move on. That's the unspoken rule. Keep it brief. Keep it professional. So when I started seeing the same truck following the exact same route as me, I noticed it was a Freightliner. Dark blue, older model, but well-maintained. No company logo, which meant independent like me. I first saw it at a Flying J outside Abilene around 2 a.m. in the morning. I was fueling up, and it pulled in right after me, parking at the pump directly across. The driver got out. Middle-aged guy, average build, wearing a baseball cap and reflective sunglasses. Even though it was the middle of the night, he caught me looking and gave me a friendly wave. I nodded back and minded my business. 3 hours later, I stopped at a rest area near the New Mexico border. Just a quick bathroom break, in and out. When I got back to my truck, the blue Freightliner was there, 4 spots down, engine running. The driver was sitting in his cab, and when he saw me, he waved again. Same friendly gesture. I waved back, but something felt off. The route I take isn't exactly uncommon, but the timing felt too precise. Same stops, same intervals. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe he was hauling to Phoenix too. Maybe we just happened to keep the same pace. I got back on the highway and tried not to think about it. But then I saw him at the next stop and the one after that. Every single place I pulled over, he was there within minutes. Sometimes he arrived first. Sometimes he pulled in right after me. But he was always there. Always parked close enough that I could see him. Always gave that same wave. By the time I hit Deming, I was deliberately changing my pattern. I'd been planning to stop at the usual truck stop, but instead, I took an exit 10 miles early, pulled into a small independent lot I'd never used before. It was nearly empty, just a couple of beat-up semis that looked like they'd been there for days, and a closed diner with a flickering sign. I parked, locked my doors, and waited. 5 minutes passed, 10. I started to relax. Maybe I finally shaken him. Maybe it really had been coincidence, and I was just being paranoid from too many hours on the road. Then I saw the headlights. The blue Freightliner pulled into the lot, slow and deliberate, like it was looking for something. It circled once, then parked 3 spaces away from me. Same spot configuration as before, close, but not directly next to me. The driver got out. He stretched, looked around the empty lot, and looked directly at my truck and waved. I didn't wave back this time. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, just watching my truck. Then he walked toward the diner, tried the door, found it locked, and walked back to his rig. He climbed inside, but didn't start the engine. Just sat there. I sat there too, watching him in my side mirror. My phone was in my hand, but what was I going to report? A guy driving the same route, parking near me. That's not illegal. That's not even technically threatening. But every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. After 20 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I started my engine and pulled out of the lot. The blue Freightliner didn't follow immediately, but about 5 meters down the highway, I saw those headlights again. Keeping pace, not getting closer, not falling back, just there. I drove straight through to Phoenix without stopping. Delivered my load, took 2 days off at a motel, barely sleeping, jumping at every engine sound in the parking lot. When I finally headed back to Dallas, I took a completely different route, I-20 through El Paso instead of my usual path. Different stops, different timing, everything different. I didn't see the blue Freightliner once. The whole drive back was quiet, and I started to convince myself I'd overreacted, that it had been coincidence, that I'd let isolation and exhaustion mess with my head. I got back to Dallas on a Thursday afternoon and went straight home to my apartment. I live in a quiet complex on the edge of town, the kind of place where most people are at work during the day. I parked my personal truck in my assigned spot and headed upstairs, already thinking about a hot shower and a real bed. That's when I looked out my living room window. The blue Freightliner was parked across the street. I stood there frozen, staring down at it. It was tucked into a corner of the public lot across from my building, partially hidden behind a delivery van. The cab was dark. I couldn't see if anyone was inside. I grabbed my phone and went back downstairs, heart pounding. I crossed the street and approached the truck. Up close, I could see it was the same one. Same scratches on the door. Same faded paint on the bumper. The cab was empty. I looked around the parking lot, the street, the sidewalks. No one. I walked around the entire truck, checking for signs of the driver, for anything that might tell me what was happening. The doors were locked. There was nothing inside except a folded map on the passenger seat. I went back to my apartment and watched from the window. The truck sat there for 6 hours. No one came to it. No one drove it away. It just sat there as the sun went down and the streetlights came on. Around midnight, I couldn't stand it anymore. I went back downstairs with a flashlight and my phone ready to call 911. The truck was still there. I walked up to the driver's side door and shined my light inside. The map on the passenger seat was unfolded now, and there was a red circle drawn around my apartment building. I called the police. They came, took a report, ran the plates. The truck had been reported stolen 3 weeks ago in Oklahoma. They impounded it, dusted for prints, found nothing useful. The driver was gone, and they had no leads. The officer told me it was probably just someone using the stolen truck to case apartments, that I'd scared them off by approaching it. But that doesn't explain how he knew my route, or how he knew where I lived. I still drive the same roads. I still haul the same loads, but now I check my mirrors constantly, and I don't wave at anyone anymore. Last week I was fueling up outside Amarillo when I saw another trucker staring at me from across the lot. Different truck, different guy, but when I pulled out, he pulled out right after me, and I swear I saw him wave. The voice on Channel 19. Someone was using my name on the CB radio. Someone who knew where I was going. I drive overnight routes up through the Midwest, mostly Wisconsin to Minnesota, delivering automotive parts to factories. It's quiet work, which suits me fine. I keep my CB radio on Channel 19, the trucker channel, but I rarely use it, except to check for traffic updates or speed traps. Mostly it's just background noise. Guys complaining about dispatchers, warning about accidents, the occasional joke that's never as funny as they think it is. This happened in January, middle of a cold snap that had the whole region locked down in sub-zero temperatures. I'd left Milwaukee around 11 p.m., headed for a factory outside of Minneapolis. My load wasn't due until 6 a.m., so I had time. But the roads were empty, and the weather was getting worse. Light snow. The kind that doesn't look dangerous, but turns the pavement into glass. About an hour into the drive, somewhere on Highway 53, my CB crackled to life. "Hey there, Eddie. Cold night to be on the road." I glanced at the radio. The voice was calm, almost friendly, but nobody had called me Eddie in years. I go by Edward now, have for the past decade. Only my ex-wife and a couple of old friends still use that name, and none of them are truckers. I picked up the handset. "Who's this?" Static. No response. I figured it was just someone messing around. Maybe mistook me for someone else. I set the handset down and kept driving. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty in both directions. No taillights, no headlights coming toward me. Just me in the snow. 10 minutes later, the voice came back. "You're making good time, Eddie. Should hit Eau Claire in about 40 minutes if you keep this pace." My hands tightened on the wheel. Eau Claire was my next checkpoint. There's a truck stop there I always use to refuel, but I hadn't told anyone my route. My dispatcher knew my destination, but not my stops. This was my usual path, but it's not like it was public information. I grabbed the handset again. "I don't know who this is, but you've got the wrong guy." "No, I don't think so. You're driving a Peterbilt 579 white cab, calling from Midwest Auto Supply, license plate." And then he read off my plate number. Every digit correct. I felt my stomach drop. I checked my mirrors. Still nothing behind me, nothing ahead. The highway was completely empty. "How do you know that?" I said into the handset. "I know lots of things, Eddie. I know you left Milwaukee at 11:12. I know you've got a delivery in Minneapolis at 6. I know you always stop at the same truck stop in Eau Claire, the one off exit 68. He was right. All of it. That was exactly my routine. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A low chuckle came through the speaker. Not exactly. I scanned the road again. There were no vehicles anywhere near me. The only lights I could see were distant farmhouses, tiny pinpricks in the dark. I thought about pulling over, but the idea of stopping in the middle of nowhere with someone tracking my location seemed worse than keeping moving. "What do you want?" I said static. Then just wanted to chat. Gets lonely out here, doesn't it? All those empty miles, nobody to talk to. "I'm not interested in chatting. Leave me alone." I turned the CB off. For about 20 minutes, I drove in silence. My heart was racing, and I kept checking the mirrors obsessively, looking for any sign of another vehicle. Nothing. The highway remained empty. The snow was falling harder now, starting to accumulate on the shoulders. Then my CB turned itself back on. I stared at it. I'd seen the light go dark, but now it was lit up again, and the channel indicator showed 19. "You can't ignore me, Eddie." The voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something off. "I've been with you the whole time." "That's impossible," I said, not bothering with the handset, knowing somehow he'd hear me anyway. "Is it? Check your mirrors again." "Really? Look." I looked. The highway behind me was still empty, but then I noticed something. In the far distance, maybe half a mile back, there was a faint glow. Not headlights exactly, more like the reflection of lights bouncing off the snow and trees. As I watched, the glow got brighter. A truck was coming up behind me fast. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my rig harder than I should have on icy roads. The speedometer climbed. 60, 65, 70. The glow in my mirrors kept pace, never getting closer, but never falling back either. "Where are you going, Eddie?" "You'll still need to stop for fuel. Exit 68. Remember, that's your spot." He was right. My tank was running low. I'd planned to fuel up at Eau Claire like always, but there was no way I was stopping now. I'd push through, find a different stop, anywhere but the place he expected. "I'm not stopping." I said, "Yes, you will." You don't have a choice. Exit 68 was coming up in 5 miles. I stayed in the right lane, watching the exit approach. The truck behind me was still there, matching my speed perfectly. As I passed the exit without slowing down, I expected the vehicle to follow, to stay on my tail. Instead, the glow disappeared. I checked my mirrors. The highway behind me was completely dark. Whoever it was had taken the exit. The CB crackled. "See you soon, Eddie." I kept driving, my fuel gauge dropping into the red. I made it another 30 miles before I had no choice but to stop at a small independent station, off Highway 8. It was tiny, just 2 pumps and a closed convenience store with bars on the windows. No other vehicles in sight. I fueled up as fast as I could, my hands shaking, constantly looking over my shoulder. The whole time, the CB in my truck was silent. When I finished, I jumped back in the cab and got back on the highway. I drove straight through to Minneapolis without stopping again. Made my delivery, sat in the factory parking lot as the sun came up, trying to convince myself it was over. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've changed my route. I stop at different places, different times. I even bought a new CB radio, thinking maybe the old one was hacked or bugged somehow. But 2 nights ago, on a run through Illinois, the new CB crackled to life on Channel 19. "Hey there, Eddie. New radio? That's smart, but it won't help." I grabbed the handset. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" There was a pause. Then I told you, "I've been with you the whole time." And then I heard it in the background of the transmission behind his voice. The same song that was playing on my own radio. The exact same moment. The exact same static interference. He wasn't following me. He was inside my truck. I pulled over on the shoulder, threw open my door, and jumped out onto the highway. I stood there in the freezing wind, staring at my empty cab, the CB radio still glowing on the dash. The voice came through the open door, calm as ever. "Don't worry, Eddie. I'll still be here when you get back in." I reported the truck stolen that morning, told them I'd been carjacked, that I'd run away, and called the police. They found the truck abandoned in a rest area 50 miles away. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no evidence anyone had ever been inside. I don't drive anymore. I couldn't get back in that cab. Couldn't trust any truck after that. But sometimes late at night, I'll be sitting in my apartment, and I'll hear it. That same voice, faint and distant, like it's coming through a radio I don't own. "Hey there, Eddie. Just wanted to chat." The detour signs. The road I'd driven 1,000 times was closed, except it wasn't supposed to be. I haul refrigerated goods up and down the East Coast, mostly produce from Florida to the Northeast. It's steady work, predictable routes, and after 12 years doing it, I know every mile of I-95 like I know my own driveway. I know which rest stops have the cleanest bathrooms, which way stations are most likely to pull you over, which stretches of highway get congested at what times. Routine is everything in this job, so when I saw the detour signs, I knew something was wrong. It was a Thursday night in late September, and I was northbound through Georgia with a load of citrus headed for a distribution center in Delaware. I'd left Jacksonville around 7:00 p.m., planning to push through the night and arrive by morning. The highway was clear, traffic light, everything normal. Then, just past the exit for Brunswick, I saw the first sign. "Road closed ahead. Detour 2 miles." Big orange reflective sign, official looking, sitting on the shoulder with yellow flashers. I frowned. I hadn't heard anything about construction on this stretch. No warnings from other drivers on the CB. Nothing on the traffic apps, but road work happens, especially at night when there's less traffic. A mile later, another sign. Detour. Next right. The exit it was pointing to was State Route 25, a 2-lane highway that cuts west through rural Georgia. I'd been past this exit hundreds of times, but never taken it. There was no reason to. It doesn't go anywhere useful, just small towns and farmland, before eventually looping back to I-95, about 60 miles north. I slowed down as I approached the exit. In the distance, I could see what looked like police lights, blue and red flashers blocking the highway. I couldn't see an accident, no emergency vehicles, just the lights. A figure in a reflective vest was waving traffic toward the exit. I took the detour. State Route 25 was dark. The kind of dark you only get in rural areas with no streetlights, no houses, just trees pressing in on both sides of the road. My headlights cut through the blackness, and the center line was faded almost to nothing. I hadn't seen another car since I'd exited. I turned on my CB, flipping through channels. Nothing, not even static. That was odd. There's usually someone talking, even in the dead of night. I tried my phone. No signal. Also strange, but not unheard of in rural areas. About 10 miles down Route 25, I saw another sign. Detour. Turn left. It was pointing toward an even smaller road, barely more than a paved path cutting through the woods. No route number, no street name, just the detour arrow. This didn't feel right. Official detours don't route you onto unmarked roads. They keep you on state highways, numbered routes with clear signage. But I'd come this far, and turning around meant backtracking 10 miles to the interstate, assuming it was even open. I took the turn. The road got narrower. Trees scraped against the side of my trailer as I navigated the tight curves. My rig wasn't built for roads like this. I needed highways, wide lanes, proper clearance. Every turn made me nervous that I'd get stuck or jackknife in the dark. Then I saw the house. It was set back from the road, barely visible through the trees. A small farmhouse. Lights on in the windows, and in the driveway, I saw another semi-truck. I slowed down. The truck looked abandoned. Weeds growing around the tires, rust on the cab. It had been there a while. Next to it was another detour sign, this one pointing further down the road. Something in my gut told me to stop, to turn around, even if it meant tearing up my trailer on these narrow roads. But before I could decide, I saw headlights in my rear-view mirror. Another truck was behind me. Close. Too close for these tight roads. I couldn't see the make or model, just the high-mounted lights bearing down on me. I sped up slightly, trying to put some distance between us, but the road was too winding. The truck behind me matched my speed, staying right on my tail. If I brake, he'd hit me. Another detour sign appeared. Continue straight. The road ahead forked, and the sign was directing me to stay on the main path. The other fork looked even worse. Unpaved, disappearing into complete darkness. I kept straight. The truck behind me turned onto the unpaved fork and disappeared. I was alone again. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I'd been driving for maybe 30 minutes since leaving the interstate, but it felt like hours. Nothing about this made sense. Where was the construction that had supposedly closed I-95? Why were there detour signs on roads that barely existed? Then I came around a curve and saw them. 3 more semi-trucks, all parked in a small clearing on the side of the road. Cabs dark, no drivers visible. One of them had the same company logo as mine, Coastal Refrigerated Transport. Same model truck, same refrigeration unit. Like looking at a copy of my own rig. I didn't stop. I kept my foot on the gas and kept moving. The road started to widen slightly, and I thought maybe I was finally getting close to civilization, to another highway, to something normal. Then I saw the sign that made my blood run cold. Welcome to Brunswick. Drive safely. Brunswick, the town I'd passed an hour ago on I-95, the town before the detour. I'd driven in a complete circle. I pulled over, my engine idling, and sat there trying to understand. I looked at my GPS. No signal. The CB. Dead air. I checked my fuel gauge. I'd burned through almost a quarter tank, which meant I'd driven at least 60 miles. But I was right back where I'd started. I heard a tap on my passenger window. I jumped, my heart hammering. There was a man standing outside, wearing a reflective vest and holding a flashlight. He made a rolling motion with his hand, the universal signal to lower your window. I didn't move. He tapped again, harder this time. Then he pointed at something. I followed his gesture and saw what he was pointing at. A detour sign, right next to my truck, pointing back toward the road I'd just come from. The man smiled and waved me forward, directing me back onto the dark road. I locked my doors, threw the truck into gear, and punched the accelerator. I drove straight past him, past the detour sign, and crashed through a wooden barrier I hadn't seen before. My truck bounced hard as I hit the main road, the actual main road, State Route 25, the one that was on maps. I drove north until I hit I-95 again, which was completely open. No construction, no road closure, no police lights, just normal highway traffic. I completed my delivery in Delaware and filed a report with my company about the bizarre detour. They had no record of any road closures that night. No construction permits, no accidents, nothing. I asked them to check on the driver who had a truck like mine, same company. They looked into it. There was another coastal refrigerated driver who'd been scheduled to run the same road as me 3 months ago. He'd left Jacksonville headed for Delaware. They found his truck 2 weeks later in rural Georgia, abandoned in the woods off an unmarked road. No sign of the driver, no sign of the cargo. The police report mentioned something else, something they found in the cab. A handwritten note that said, "Don't follow the detour signs." Last week I was driving through Georgia again. Different route this time. Staying on I-95 no matter what. But just past Brunswick, I saw them. New detour signs, fresh orange paint, yellow flashers, and in the distance, I could see other trucks, their brake lights flashing as they took the exit. I kept driving straight, but in my mirror, I watched them disappear down that dark road one by one, and I wondered if any of them would make it back. I picked him up outside of Reno. The hitchhiker's backpack dropped him off in Salt Lake City, but his backpack is still in my truck. I've got a rule about hitchhikers. I don't pick them up. Never have, never will. Too many stories about things going wrong. And when you're alone in a cab with someone for hours, you're vulnerable in ways most people don't think about. But that night outside Reno, I broke my rule. It was late March, and I was hauling electronics from Sacramento to Denver. The route takes you through some desolate stretches. Nevada desert, empty highway, nothing but darkness for miles. I'd stopped at a gas station just outside Reno around 1 a.m. to fuel up and grab coffee. That's where I saw him. He was standing near the edge of the lot, thumb out, backpack at his feet, college-aged kid, maybe 22 or 23, clean cut, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He didn't look threatening. He looked cold and tired. I ignored him, paid for my coffee, and headed back to my truck. But as I was climbing into the cab, he approached my window. "Hey man, any chance you're heading east? I'm trying to get to Salt Lake City." I should have said no. Should have stuck to my rule. But something about the way he asked, polite, not desperate or pushy, made me hesitate. "I'm going through there," I said, "but I don't usually pick up riders." "I understand. I've got cash for gas money if that helps. I just really need to get home." I looked at him. He seemed genuine, and Salt Lake City was right on my route anyway. "All right," I said, "but any weird behavior and you're out. Understood?" "Absolutely. Thank you so much." He grabbed his backpack and climbed into the passenger seat. The backpack was old and heavy-looking, canvas with leather straps, the kind hikers use. He set it on the floor between his feet. We got back on I-80 and drove in silence for the first 30 minutes. He didn't try to make conversation, just stared out the window at the dark desert passing by. I appreciated that. Some people feel the need to fill every silence, but he seemed content to just ride. Eventually, he spoke. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "Tom," I said, "thanks again for the ride. My car broke down in Sacramento, and I've been trying to get home for 2 days." "No problem. You got family in Salt Lake?" "Yeah, my sister. She's been sick, and I need to get back to help out. That explained the urgency. We talked a bit more. Nothing deep, just small talk about the drive, the weather, the usual road conversation. He seemed normal, friendly even. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, we stopped at a rest area in Nevada. I needed to use the bathroom, and Marcus said he'd stretch his legs. I watched him in my side mirror as he walked around the parking lot, hands in his pockets, just pacing. When I came back, he was already in the truck, eyes closed, leaning against the window. "Mind if I sleep for a bit?" he asked. "Go ahead." He dozed off within minutes, and I drove through the night in silence. Having someone else in the cab was strange. I'd gotten so used to being alone, but it wasn't unpleasant, just different. We crossed into Utah as the sun started to rise. Marcus woke up around 6 o'clock, stretched, and looked out at the landscape. "We're making good time," he said. "Should hit Salt Lake around 8. Perfect." He went quiet again, staring out the window. I noticed he kept glancing down at his backpack, like he was checking to make sure it was still there. After the 3rd or 4th time, I finally asked, "What have you got in there? You keep looking at it." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Just my stuff. Laptop, some clothes, everything I own basically." "You travel light?" Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on what. We drove for another hour without talking. The closer we got to Salt Lake City, the more tense he seemed. He kept checking his phone, even though there was no signal out here. His leg bounced nervously. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, fine. Just anxious to get home." We hit the outskirts of Salt Lake City around 8:15. Marcus directed me to a residential area on the east side of town, a neighborhood of small houses and apartment complexes. "Just drop me at that corner up there," he said, pointing to an intersection. I pulled over. He reached for his door handle, then paused. "Hey, do you mind if I use your phone real quick? Mine's dead, and I need to call my sister to let her know I'm here." He stepped out of the truck and walked a few feet away, talking quietly. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but the conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes. He came back, handed me the phone. "Thanks, man. I really appreciate everything." "No problem. Hope your sister feels better." He nodded, grabbed his backpack, and walked away. I watched him in my mirror until he turned a corner and disappeared behind a house. I pulled back onto the highway and continued toward Denver. My delivery wasn't until that evening, so I had time to kill. I stopped at a diner in Park City for breakfast, then got back on the road. That's when I noticed it. There was something wedged under the passenger seat. I reached down and pulled it out. Marcus's backpack. My stomach dropped. He'd taken his backpack when he got out. I'd seen him grab it. I was sure of it. But here it was, stuffed under the seat, like someone had deliberately hidden it. I pulled over on the shoulder and opened the backpack. Inside were clothes like he'd said, a laptop, a phone charger, and underneath everything wrapped in a towel was a handgun. I stared at it, my mind racing. It wasn't illegal to transport a gun, but something about finding it hidden in my truck felt wrong. I checked the rest of the backpack. No ID, no wallet, nothing with his name on it. Then I found the notebook. It was small, spiral-bound, tucked into a side pocket. I opened it to the first page. It was a list of names, 10, maybe 12 of them. Some had addresses next to them, some had dates, and next to 3 of the names, there were check marks. One of the addresses was in Salt Lake City, the neighborhood where I dropped him off. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the call log, looking for the number Marcus had called. It was there, a local Salt Lake number. I hesitated, then called it back. It rang 4 times before someone answered. A woman's voice, groggy. "Hello. Hi. I'm looking for Marcus. Did he just call you?" "Ooh, I think you have the wrong number. He called this number from my phone about an hour ago. I don't know anyone named Marcus, and I've been asleep. My phone didn't ring." I felt cold. "Are you sure?" "Positive. Is this some kind of prank?" I hung up, Checked my call log again. The number was definitely there. The call had definitely happened, but whoever answered claimed they hadn't received it. I sat there on the shoulder for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do. Call the police and tell them what? That I picked up a hitchhiker who left a backpack in my truck? That he had a gun and a notebook? I decided to drive to the address in the notebook, just to see, just to know. It took me 40 minutes to get back to Salt Lake City. I found the street, a quiet residential area with older homes. The address was a small blue house with an overgrown yard. There was police tape across the front door. I parked down the street and watched. After a few minutes, a patrol car pulled up and 2 officers got out. They talked to a woman standing in the driveway. She was crying, holding a tissue to her face. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. I drove away. That night, I checked the news. Nothing. The next day, still nothing. No reports of anything happening at that address. No missing persons, no incidents. I threw the backpack away at a truck stop in Colorado, dumped it in a dumpster behind the building, and tried to forget about it. But 3 weeks later, I was hauling a load through Wyoming when my CB crackled to life. "Hey, Tom." I froze. The voice was calm, familiar. "Thanks again for the ride to Salt Lake. I forgot my backpack, though. Think you could bring it next time you're through?" I grabbed the handset with shaking hands. "Who is this?" "You know who it is. How did you get on this channel? How do you know my name?" Static. "Then I'll be in Denver next week. Maybe I'll catch another ride with you." The CB went silent. I sold my truck 2 days ago. Told my company I was done, that I couldn't do long haul anymore. But yesterday, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo taken from inside a truck cab. Through the windshield, you could see a highway stretching into the distance, and in the passenger seat, reflected in the window, was a backpack. The way station that wasn't there. I got pulled into a way station that doesn't exist on any map. I've been driving commercial routes through the Pacific Northwest for 9 years, and I know every way station between Seattle and Portland like the back of my hand. There are exactly 7 along I-5, and I've been through each one hundreds of times. The procedures are always the same. Pull in, roll over the scales, wait for the green light, move on. It's routine, boring even, which is why I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the 8th one. It was a Tuesday in November, pouring rain like it does in Oregon that time of year. I'd left Seattle around midnight with a load of furniture headed for Eugene. The highway was mostly empty, just the occasional car and a few other semis spread out over the miles. I was about an hour south of Olympia when I saw the sign, "Way Station 2 miles. All commercial vehicles must enter." There shouldn't be a way station here. The next one wasn't until another 40 miles south, but the sign looked official. Same green and white design as all the others. Same reflective lettering. I figured maybe they'd built a new one since my last run. A mile later, another sign. "Way station open. Prepare to stop." I started slowing down. The exit came up on my right, and I took it, following the ramp into what looked like a standard way station facility. Single building, scales embedded in the pavement, a covered area for inspections. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. There were no other trucks. Every way station I'd ever been through had at least 1 or 2 other rigs, especially the ones that stayed open overnight. But this one was completely empty. Just my headlights cutting through the rain and darkness. I rolled up to the scales and stopped, waiting for instructions. Usually there's an electronic sign that tells you whether to proceed or pull aside for inspection. But the sign here was blank, dark. I sat there for maybe 2 minutes, engine idling, wipers beating back and forth. Nothing happened. No lights, no signal, no personnel coming out of the building. I was about to call it a glitch and just leave when I saw movement in my passenger mirror. Someone was walking toward my truck from the building. A figure in a rain jacket and reflective vest carrying a flashlight. I relaxed slightly, just an inspector doing their job. The figure approached my driver's side door and motioned for me to roll down the window. I cracked it a few inches. rain immediately spattering inside. "License and registration," the person said. The voice was muffled by the hood of the rain jacket, and I couldn't see their face clearly in the dark. I grabbed my documents from the visor and handed them through the window. The figure took them and walked back toward the building without another word. I sat there watching in my mirror as they disappeared through a door. The rain was getting heavier, drumming on the roof of my cab. I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual in some parts of rural Oregon. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I started getting impatient. Inspections don't usually take this long unless there's a problem, and I knew my paperwork was in order. My load was secured properly. Everything was by the book. After 15 minutes, I decided to go check what was taking so long. I grabbed my jacket and climbed out into the rain, jogging toward the building where the inspector had gone. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was wrong. Way station offices are usually utilitarian. Desks, computers, filing cabinets, break room in the back. This place was completely empty. No furniture, no equipment, just bare walls and a concrete floor. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness. "Hello," I called out. No response. I walked through the main room and into what should have been the office area. Also empty. There was a back door, slightly ajar, and I could see it led outside to a parking area behind the building. I pushed the door open and looked out. Nothing. No vehicles, no people. Just an empty lot with weeds growing through the cracked pavement. My documents were sitting on the ground near the door, getting soaked by the rain. I grabbed them and ran back to my truck, my heart pounding now. Something was very wrong. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and threw the truck into gear. As I pulled away from the scales, I glanced back at the building. All the lights were off. The whole place looked abandoned, like it hadn't been used in years. I got back on the highway and drove for another hour before I felt calm enough to stop. I pulled into a real rest area, one I recognized with other trucks and cars in the lot, and sat there trying to make sense of what had happened. The next morning, after making my delivery in Eugene, I called the Department of Transportation. I described the way station, gave them the approximate location. "Sir, there's no way station at that location." The woman on the phone said, "The nearest one to where you're describing is 40 miles south." I'm telling you, I was there. I pulled in. There were scales, a building, signs on the highway. I'm looking at our database right now. There's nothing there. Are you sure about the location? I was sure, but she insisted there was nothing on record. I drove that same route again the following week, paying close attention to the area where I'd seen the way station. I passed the spot easily. I knew exactly where it should be. There was nothing. No exit ramp, no building, no signs. Just highway and trees. I told myself I'd been exhausted, that I'd hallucinated the whole thing or taken a wrong turn somewhere. But I had my documents. I'd held them in my hands, seen them lying on the ground behind that empty building. 3 months went by. I drove the I-5 route at least twice a week and never saw the way station again. I started to think maybe I really had imagined it. Then last week, I was talking to another driver at a truck stop in Portland. Older guy, been driving for 20 years. We were swapping stories about weird experiences on the road, and I mentioned the Phantom Way Station as a joke. He went quiet, stared at me for a long moment. "Where did you say this was?" he asked. I told him the approximate mile marker. "What happened after you went inside the building?" "Nothing. It was empty. The inspector had disappeared." "Did you notice anything else? Anything unusual about the place?" I thought back. The parking lot behind the building looked abandoned, overgrown. Any vehicles back there? Even old ones? I tried to remember. It had been dark, raining hard. But now that he mentioned it, I did recall seeing something. The shape of a truck, barely visible through the rain, parked at the far end of the lot. I'd assumed it was just abandoned equipment. Maybe, I said. Why? He looked uncomfortable. I heard a story once from another driver, about 10 years ago. He told me about a way station that appeared on I-5, always at night, always in the rain. Said he pulled in and never saw the inspector after they took his documents. Place looked abandoned when he went to check. What happened to him? Nothing. He drove away just like you did. But he said he saw something in that back parking lot. An old truck with someone sitting in the cab. My skin went cold. Did he say anything else? Yeah, he said about a month later. He was at a different way station, a real one, and one of the inspectors mentioned they'd been looking for a missing driver. Guy had disappeared somewhere on I-5. They'd found his truck abandoned at a closed way station, one that had been shut down for years. I didn't sleep well that night. Yesterday, I was driving south on I-5 again. Different route this time, different cargo. But as I approached that same area, I felt my chest tighten. The way station sign was back. Way station 2 miles. All commercial vehicles must enter. I didn't take the exit. I kept driving, hands gripping the wheel, watching my mirrors. A few minutes later, I passed another truck on the shoulder. Hazard lights on. Driver's door open. The truck was empty, and in my rearview mirror, barely visible through the rain, I saw brake lights as another semi took the exit I just passed. The gas station attendant knew my name. The midnight fuel stop. I'd never been there before in my life. I run freight between Kansas City and Amarillo, mostly agricultural equipment and parts. It's a straightforward route down Highway 54, mostly empty roads through small Kansas towns that barely show up on maps. I usually drive overnight to avoid traffic and heat, and I've gotten used to the solitude. Just me, the road, and whatever podcast I'm listening to. This happened in early August, around 2:30 in the morning. I'd left Kansas City at 10 p.m., and I was making good time until my low fuel light came on earlier than expected. I checked my gauge. Must have had a slow leak somewhere. I wasn't going to make it to my usual stop in Liberal. I started watching for gas stations, but at that hour in rural Kansas, most places are closed. I was starting to get nervous when I finally saw lights up ahead. A small station, the old-fashioned kind with just 2 pumps under a metal awning. The sign said, "Open 24 hours." I pulled in, relieved. The place looked ancient. Faded paint, cracked concrete, a single flickering fluorescent light above the pumps, but the lights were on inside the little building, and I could see someone moving around behind the counter. I got out and started fueling up. The air was thick and hot, even in the middle of the night, and there wasn't a sound except for my fuel pump clicking. No other cars, no traffic on the highway, just complete silence. When the tank was full, I headed inside to pay. The door chimed as I entered, and I got a better look at the place. It was like stepping back in time. Ancient cash register, shelves stocked with dusty products, a few fly strips hanging from the ceiling. Everything had a yellowish tinge from the old lighting. The attendant was standing behind the counter, a man in his 60s with thinning gray hair and thick glasses. He smiled when he saw me. "Pump tube." I stopped. "How did you know my name?" He gestured toward the counter. My credit card was sitting there. Says it right on the card. But I hadn't given him my card yet. I was still holding it in my hand. I looked down. My wallet was in my pocket, card inside. I looked back at the counter. There was definitely a credit card sitting there, and from where I stood, I could see my name embossed on it. "I haven't paid yet," I said slowly. The attendant's smile didn't waver. "Oh, must have been from last time. You probably left it." "I've never been here before." "Sure you have. You stop here every couple of weeks. Always get diesel. Always pay with this car." He picked it up and held it out to me. My mouth went dry. I'd been running this route for 3 years, and I'd never seen this gas station before. I would have remembered it. The old-fashioned setup, the isolation, everything about it stood out. "I think you're confusing me with someone else," I said. He shook his head, still smiling. "No confusion. I remember all my regulars. You always come through around 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. You usually get a coffee, too. Want one tonight?" I wanted to leave, but I needed to pay for the fuel. I pulled out my actual credit card and set it on the counter next to the other one. They were identical. Same name, same number, same expiration date. The attendant looked at both cards, then at me. His smile finally faded. "Which one's real?" "Mine is," I said, pointing to the one I'd just put down. "I don't know where that other one came from." He picked up both cards, examining them closely. "They're both real, same numbers and everything." He set them down and leaned forward. "You feeling all right, Robert? You look confused." "I'm fine. I just need to pay and leave." "Of course." He rang up the fuel, charged one of the cards. I couldn't tell which, and handed me a receipt. Then he pushed both credit cards across the counter toward me. "You should probably keep better track of these." I grabbed both cards and walked quickly toward the door. As I reached for the handle, he called out, "Drive safe, Robert. See you in 2 weeks." I got back in my truck and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I looked at the 2 credit cards. They were absolutely identical. Same wear patterns, same scratches, like duplicates from the same moment in time. I started the engine and pulled out of the station, watching it disappear in my mirrors. The lights got smaller and smaller until they vanished completely into the darkness. I drove for another hour before I stopped at a rest area to examine the cards more carefully under the interior light. I called my credit card company from the rest area, told them I'd found a duplicate of my card and needed to cancel it. "Which card would you like to cancel, Mr. Patterson?" the representative asked. "The duplicate. The one that's not mine." "Sir, I'm showing only one card active on your account. The one ending in 4738. I looked at both cards. They both ended in 4738. "Can you tell me the last few transactions?" I asked. She read them off. The most recent was the fuel purchase I just made. Before that, my dinner in Kansas City. Before that, various purchases from the past week. "Is there one from 2 weeks ago at a gas station on Highway 54? I heard keyboard clicking. "Yes, sir. August 1st, 2:47 a.m. Fuel purchase at a station called Red's Gas on Highway 54. Does that help?" I felt sick. Today was August 15th. 2 weeks ago I'd driven this same route, but I'd stopped at a different gas station. I specifically remembered it because they'd been out of coffee, and I'd been annoyed. "What's the address of Red's Gas?" I asked. I put it into my phone's GPS. No results found. I tried searching for Red's Gas, Highway 54, Kansas. Nothing came up. I tried just Red's Gas, Kansas. Still nothing. But according to my credit card statement, I'd been there 2 weeks ago. I made my delivery in Amarillo and drove straight back to Kansas City without stopping. I took a different route home, Highway 400, instead of 54. I told myself I'd just been tired, that the attendant had been confused, that there was some logical explanation for everything. 2 weeks later, I had another run to Amarillo. I took Highway 54 again, telling myself it was the most efficient route, telling myself I wasn't looking for anything. Around 2:30 in the morning, I saw the lights. The same gas station, same location, Red's Gas. I should have kept driving, but my fuel was running low again, and it was the only station for miles. I pulled in. The attendant was behind the counter. Same man, same smile. "Evening, Robert. Pump 2 again." "Again," I said, just like 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks before that, he pulled out a credit card and held it up. "You left this last time. I've been keeping it safe for you." I looked at my wallet. My credit card was inside. The attendant placed the card on the counter. "You know, Robert, you really should try to remember your stops. All this confusion isn't good for you." I paid with cash this time. Didn't touch either credit card. As I was leaving, the attendant called out, "See you in 2 weeks, Robert. Same time." I drove away and checked my credit card statement the next day. There was a charge from Red's Gas from the night before, but I'd paid cash. Last night I was going through old receipts for tax purposes. I found one from Red's Gas, dated 6 months ago. I don't remember stopping there. I found another from a year ago, then another from 18 months ago. At exactly 2:47 a.m., I called my company this morning and told them I can't run the Kansas City to Amarillo route anymore. They asked why. I didn't have a good answer. But tonight I'm in my apartment in Kansas City, and I just checked my credit card app. There's a pending charge. Red Scats Highway 54. Time 2:47 a.m. That's 4 hours from now, and I'm 200 meters away from Highway 54. I delivered a load to a warehouse that the empty trailer had been abandoned for 3 years. I haul general freight across the Midwest, picking up whatever needs moving between distribution centers. Most of the time, I know exactly what I'm carrying. Pallets of retail goods, industrial supplies, food products. But sometimes you get what we call a sealed load. The trailer gets loaded and locked at the origin point. You're not allowed to open it, and you just deliver it to wherever the manifest says. I got one of those jobs in late February. My dispatcher called and said I had a pickup in St. Louis, delivery to a warehouse outside of Springfield, Illinois. Simple run, maybe 3 hours. The paperwork came through and everything looked standard except for one thing. The delivery time was specific. Not a window, not before 5 p.m., but exactly 11:47 p.m. That was unusual. Most warehouses don't even operate that late, let alone request precise delivery times down to the minute. But the pay was good, and I've learned not to ask too many questions about the weird jobs. I picked up the sealed trailer in St. Louis around 6 o'clock p.m. It was already loaded and locked when I got there. The guy at the dock just had me sign the paperwork, hook up, and go. I asked what was in it out of habit. "No idea," he said. "Came in this morning, already sealed. We're just the transfer point." The trailer felt light when I pulled out, maybe a quarter full at most. I could feel it behind me on the highway, the way an empty trailer handles differently than a full load. Whatever was in there, there wasn't much of it. I headed north on I-55, planning to arrive in Springfield around 9:30, giving myself plenty of time before the 11:47 delivery slot. The drive was uneventful until I got close to Springfield and pulled up the delivery address on my GPS. The location was way outside town, down rural roads that got progressively smaller and more isolated. My GPS showed it as an industrial area, but as I got closer, I didn't see any businesses, just farmland and woods. I found the turnoff around 10:30, a narrow access road, barely 2 lanes, no streetlights. About a mile down, I saw a chain-link fence and a metal gate with a faded sign. Whitman Distribution Center. The gate was open. I pulled through and followed the road to a large warehouse building. It looked old. Concrete walls, high windows with most of the glass broken out, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. There were no other vehicles, no lights except for a single bulb above a loading dock door. I checked the address again. This was definitely the place. I backed up to the dock and killed the engine. According to my phone, it was 10:58 p.m. I still had almost an hour before the delivery time, but warehouses usually prefer early to late. I climbed out and walked up to the dock. There was a buzzer next to the door, old and rusted. I pressed it. Nothing happened. No sound, no response. I tried the door handle, locked. I walked around to the front of the building, looking for another entrance or an office. The front doors were chained shut, and through the dirty windows, I could see the interior was gutted. No equipment, no shelving, nothing. The place looked like it had been abandoned for years. I went back to my truck and called my dispatcher. It went to voicemail. I tried the customer service number on the manifest. No answer. I sat in my cab, staring at the building. Nothing made sense. Why would anyone schedule a delivery to an abandoned warehouse? I checked the manifest again, looking for any detail I'd missed. That's when I noticed the special instructions section. There was a single line I'd overlooked earlier. Remain with vehicle until exactly 11:47 p.m. Do not open trailer. I looked at the clock on my dash. 11:23 p.m. Something about those instructions made my skin crawl. The specificity of it, the emphasis on not opening the trailer. I'd delivered sealed loads before, but none with instructions like that. I decided to wait it out. Sitting in an empty parking lot for 20 minutes wasn't the strangest thing I'd done for a paycheck. The minutes ticked by slowly. I kept the engine off to save fuel, but that meant no heat, and the February night was cold. I could see my breath in the cab. The only sound was the wind rattling through the broken windows of the warehouse. At 11:40, I heard a vehicle approaching. Headlights appeared on the access road, moving slowly. A white van, windowless, the kind contractors use. It pulled into the parking lot and stopped about 50 feet from my truck. The headlights stayed on, pointed right at me. I watched the van in my mirror, waiting for some indication of what was happening. The driver's door was barely visible through the glare of the headlights. I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. At 11:46, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unlock trailer. Leave keys in ignition. Walk to the road. Do not look back. My hands were shaking as I read it again. Every instinct told me to start the engine and leave. But I thought about the payment, about the contract I'd signed, about the legal complications of abandoning a load. I checked the time. 11:47 p.m. I unlocked my door and climbed down, leaving the keys in the ignition, like the text said. I walked to the back of the trailer and unlatched the lock. The door swung open slightly. I didn't look inside. I didn't want to. I started walking toward the access road, keeping my eyes forward. Behind me, I heard vehicle doors opening, the sound of the trailer door being pulled fully open. I kept walking. I made it about 100 yards down the access road when I heard the first sound. A voice. No, multiple voices. Muffled, distant, coming from the direction of my truck. Not talking. Something else. It sounded almost like crying. I walked faster. The voices got louder for a moment, then abruptly stopped. I heard the trailer door slam shut. Engine sounds. The white van's headlights swept across the road as it turned around. It drove past me without slowing down, heading back toward the main highway. I couldn't see through the tinted windows. A few minutes later, my truck's engine started. I turned around just in time to see it pulling out of the parking lot, trailer still attached, heading in the same direction as the van. I stood there on the dark road alone, watching my truck disappear. I called the police, reported it stolen. They found it 6 hours later at a rest stop near Bloomington, abandoned but undamaged. The trailer was empty. The locks were still in place, but whatever had been inside was gone. My company was furious, but there wasn't much they could do. The client who'd arranged the shipment didn't exist. The business registration was fake. The payment had come from an untraceable account. The whole thing had been a setup, but nobody could figure out what for. I gave my statement to the police multiple times, told them everything. They investigated the warehouse. It had been abandoned since 2020, when the distribution company went bankrupt. No activity since then, no evidence anyone had been there. The detective asked me if I'd looked inside the trailer at any point. I said no. Probably for the best, he said. I quit long-haul trucking after that. Got a job doing local deliveries home every night. I told myself I was done with the weird jobs, the sealed loads, the questions I shouldn't ask. But last week, I got a text from an unknown number. Thank you for your service on February 24th. We have another delivery opportunity. Pick up in St. Louis. Delivery time, 11:47 p.m. Interested? I blocked the number immediately. This morning, I got a package at my apartment. No return address. Inside was an envelope with $5,000 in cash and a note. Payment for next delivery. Pickup instructions will follow. Please confirm receipt. I haven't touched the money, but my old dispatcher called an hour ago. Said he had a special job for me. Good pay. Simple run from St. Louis to Springfield. He asked if I was available tonight. Delivery time, 11:47 p.m. The mirror trucks. For 3 nights in a row, I passed the same accident, same truck, same position, but it was never there in the daylight. I run overnight routes through Montana and Wyoming, usually hauling livestock feed between ranches and distribution centers. It's isolating work. Hundreds of miles of empty highway, no cell service, just you and whatever's in your head. You learn to appreciate the solitude, or it drives you crazy. This started on a Sunday night in October. I was heading south on Highway 191, a route I'd driven maybe 50 times before. 2-lane road cuts straight through some of the emptiest country in Montana. No towns, no rest stops, just darkness and the occasional pair of animal eyes reflecting in your headlights. Around 2 in the morning, I came around a long curve and saw flares on the road ahead. Red emergency lights, the kind DIT uses for accidents. There was a semi in the ditch, tilted at an angle, hazard lights flashing. The trailer had jackknifed, blocking part of the shoulder. I couldn't see anyone around it. No police, no ambulance, no other vehicles, just the truck and the flares. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight. Protocol is you always stop to check if another driver needs help. I approached the truck carefully, calling out, "Anyone here? You all right?" No response. I got closer and shined my light into the cab. Empty. The driver's door was hanging open, keys still in the ignition, engine off. There was a coffee cup in the holder, still steaming. I looked around. No footprints in the dirt, leading away from the truck. No blood, no signs of injury. The driver had just vanished. I tried my phone. No signal, which was normal for this area. I walked back to my truck and grabbed my CB radio, calling for anyone on the emergency channel. Static. I stood there for a few minutes, unsure what to do. The truck's hazards kept flashing. The flares kept burning. Everything looked fresh. This couldn't have happened more than 10 or 15 minutes ago. Finally, I decided to keep going and report it at the next town with cell service. I got back in my cab and continued south, checking my mirrors. The accident lights faded into the distance. I reached my delivery point around 7 o'clock a.m. and immediately called the highway patrol to report the accident. Gave them the exact mile marker, description of the truck, everything. The dispatcher put me on hold, then came back. "Sir, we don't have any reports of an accident at that location. Are you sure about the mile marker?" "Positive. Semi in the ditch, jackknife trailer, flares on the road. We'll send a unit to check it out. Can you give us your contact information?" I did, then went to get some sleep at a motel. When I woke up that afternoon, I had a voicemail from the highway patrol. They'd checked the location. No accident, no truck, no flares, nothing. I told myself I'd been tired, maybe dozed off and dreamed it. Except I remembered every detail too clearly. The steaming coffee, the open door, the way the trailer was angled. It had been real. 3 days later, I had the same route. Sunday night, leaving around the same time, heading south on 191. I told myself I'd pay extra attention this time. Stay alert. Prove to myself there was nothing there. Around 2 in the morning, I came around that same curve. The accident was there again. Same truck, same jackknifed position, same flares, exactly identical to 3 nights before. I stopped my truck in the middle of the highway, hands gripping the wheel. This wasn't possible. I stared at the scene looking for any difference. Even the hazard lights seemed to be blinking in the same pattern. I sat there for a full minute trying to decide what to do. Then I noticed something in my side mirror. Another truck was stopped behind me on the highway. About 100 yards back, headlights on, just sitting there. I hadn't heard it pull up. I watched it in the mirror. The driver's door opened and someone got out. A figure in dark clothing, too far away to make out details. They stood next to their truck, facing my direction, not moving, just standing there. I put my truck in gear and drove past the accident without stopping, watching my mirrors. The figure got back in their truck, but they didn't follow me. They just stayed there, parked behind the accident. I drove straight through to my destination and called the highway patrol again. Same story. They'd check. That afternoon, I asked around at the truck stop, trying to find other drivers who used 191 regularly. Most avoided it because of how isolated it was. But I found one older guy who'd been running that route for years. "You ever see anything weird on 191?" I asked. "Around mile marker 47. His expression changed. "Why are you asking?" I told him about the accident, about seeing it twice. He was quiet for a long moment. "What kind of truck was it?" "Peterbilt. Dark blue cab, unmarked trailer." He nodded slowly, and it was jackknifed in the ditch. Driver's door open. "Yeah, you've seen it. Everyone who runs 191 at night sees it eventually. Some people see it once. Some see it multiple times. It's always the same. Same position, same details. What is it? Some kind of prank? Nobody knows. Highway Patrol has been getting calls about it for years, but they never find anything. Some guys think it's a warning. Others think it's just your mind playing tricks in the middle of nowhere. What do you think?" He looked at me seriously. "I think you should find a different route." I should have listened. But I needed the work, and 191 was the fastest way to my regular delivery points. The following Sunday, I drove the route again. I told myself I wouldn't look when I reached that curve. I'd just drive straight through. Eyes forward. Don't stop. Around 2 a.m., I approached mile marker 47. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, hands steady on the wheel, but I couldn't help it. I glanced to the side as I passed. The accident was there, flares burning, hazards flashing, and the driver was standing next to the truck. I only saw him for a second as I drove past, but it was enough. He was facing the road, watching traffic go by. He was wearing the exact same clothes I was. Same jacket, same cap, same everything. I looked down at myself, then back in the mirror. The figure was walking onto the highway, moving toward the center line, still watching my truck drive away. I pressed the accelerator harder, my heart hammering. I didn't slow down until I was 50 miles past that spot. I quit that route, told my dispatcher I wouldn't run 911 anymore. Didn't care about the pay. He tried to convince me, but I refused. That was 6 months ago. Last week, I picked up a new route through Idaho. Different highway, different state, nowhere near Montana. I felt relieved to be somewhere completely different. The first night went fine. The second night went fine. On the third night, around 2 a.m., I came around a curve on Highway 93. There were flares on the road ahead, a semi in the ditch, jackknifed, hazard lights flashing, dark blue Peterbilt, unmarked trailer. I slowed down, my stomach sinking. This was a different highway, 300 meters from 191, but the accident was identical. As I got closer, I saw the driver standing next to the truck. He was wearing different clothes this time, the same clothes I was wearing right now. I drove past without stopping. When I checked my mirror, the figure was watching my truck. Then he turned and walked back toward the accident. But he didn't get in the truck. He just stood there next to the open door, waiting like he was expecting someone. Last night, I was at a truck stop in Utah trying to sleep. I couldn't. I kept thinking about that figure, about the accidents, about the pattern. Around 2:00 a.m., I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo taken from the side of a highway at night. In the picture was a semi-truck in a ditch. Jackknife, hazard lights on. My truck. My license plate, clearly visible. I looked at the timestamp on the photo. It was taken 3 days from now on Highway 15 in Nevada, mile marker 73, a route I'm scheduled to drive this week. I haven't accepted that job yet. I'm sitting in this truck stop, trying to decide what to do. But my phone just buzzed again. Another photo, same accident, same truck, Different highway, taken 2 weeks from now. The parking lot watchers. Someone was sleeping in every truck around mine, except none of them were drivers. I've been doing long haul for about 7 years now, mostly running the I-80 corridor from Ohio to California. You get used to sleeping in truck stop parking lots. It's part of the job. You learn which ones are safe, which ones are sketchy, where the lot lizards work, where the tweakers hang out. You develop a routine, park in well-lit areas, lock your doors, and you're usually fine. This happened at a Flying J outside of North Platte, Nebraska. It was a Thursday night in September, and I'd been driving for about 9 hours straight. I needed to log some sleep before continuing west, and this particular truck stop was one I'd used dozens of times before. Big lot, good security, never had any problems. I pulled in around 11 p.m. 20 or 30 trucks scattered around, most with their curtains drawn, drivers already sleeping. I found a spot toward the back, away from the diesel pumps and the highway noise, and backed in next to a Kenworth with Oklahoma plates. I went inside to use the bathroom and grab some food. The place was quiet, just a couple of other drivers getting coffee, a clerk behind the register scrolling through his phone. Normal late-night truck stop atmosphere. When I got back to my truck, I did my usual routine. Checked the trailer lock, walked around to make sure my tires looked good, then climbed into the cab. I pulled my curtains, set my alarm for 6 a.m., and settled in. That's when I noticed the person in the truck next to me. Through my passenger window, I could see into the Kenworth's cab. The curtains weren't fully closed, and there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. Not sleeping, just sitting there, upright, facing forward, like they were driving. But the truck wasn't running. No lights on, just a silhouette in the darkness. I watched for a minute, figuring they were maybe doing paperwork or checking their phone. But they didn't move, completely still, hands in their lap, staring straight ahead. I shrugged it off and tried to sleep. Sometimes drivers have weird routines. Maybe they were meditating or something. I dozed off around midnight, but woke up an hour later, needing to use the bathroom again. I looked out the window before getting out, checking if the lot was clear. The person in the Kenworth was still sitting there, same position, hadn't moved. I climbed down from my cab and headed toward the building. As I walked through the lot, I happened to glance into some of the other trucks I passed. In the first one, a Freightliner with Texas plates, someone was sitting in the driver's seat, perfectly still, facing forward. In the next truck, same thing. Person in the driver's seat, motionless, staring ahead. I stopped walking and looked around the lot. From where I stood, I could see into maybe a dozen cabs that didn't have their curtains fully closed. Every single one had someone sitting in the driver's seat. All of them perfectly still, all of them facing forward. My skin went cold. This wasn't normal. Drivers sleep in their bunks, not upright in their seats, and definitely not this many at the same time, all in the exact same position. I turned around and walked quickly back to my truck. I locked myself inside and sat there, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Maybe it was some kind of protest or a company meeting, but it was 100 a.m. on a Thursday night in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my phone and checked the trucking forums, searching for anything about events or gatherings in North Platte. Nothing. Then I noticed something in my passenger mirror. The person in the Kenworth had turned their head. They were looking directly at my truck now. I could barely make out any features in the darkness, but I could see the outline of their face turned toward me. They sat like that for maybe 30 seconds, then slowly rotated back to face forward. I decided I wasn't sleeping here. I'd push through, find another truck stop, anywhere but here. I started my engine, and as soon as I did, something happened. All around the lot, trucks started turning on their headlights. Not the engines, just the lights, one after another, like dominoes, until every truck in the lot was lit up. But none of them moved. They just sat there, lights on, engines off. I put my truck in gear and started pulling out of my space. As I drove toward the exit, I watched my mirrors. The figures in the trucks turned their heads in unison, following my movement as I passed. I made it to the lot exit and was about to pull onto the highway when my CB radio crackled to life. "Don't leave." It was a man's voice, calm and even. "You need to stay." I didn't respond. I pulled onto I-80 and started driving west, checking my mirrors constantly. None of the trucks followed. They just sat there in the lot, lights on, figures watching. I drove for 3 hours straight before stopping at a different truck stop in Wyoming. It was nearly 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was exhausted, but I felt safer. This lot was smaller, only a handful of trucks, and I could see the drivers were actually sleeping in their bunks like normal people. I managed to get 2 hours of sleep before my alarm went off. When I woke up and checked my phone, I had a missed call from a number with a 308 area code, Nebraska. I continued my route to California, delivered my load, and tried to forget about what happened. But 3 days later, on my way back east, I stopped at a different Flying J in Wyoming to refuel. As I was walking back from paying, I saw something that made me freeze. 4 trucks in the lot, parked in a row, all with their headlights on, engines off, and in each cab, someone sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat, facing forward. I got in my truck and left immediately. I didn't stop again until I was 2 states away. That was 4 months ago. Since then, I've seen it 3 more times. Different truck stops, different states, always late at night. Always the same thing. Multiple trucks, lights on, figures sitting motionless in the driver's seats. Last week, I was talking to another driver at a rest area in Iowa. I asked him if he'd ever seen anything strange at truck stops, trying to sound casual. My stomach dropped. The what? That's what some guys call them, the watchers. They show up at different truck stops, usually late at night. Just sit there in trucks. Don't move. Don't talk. Nobody knows who they are or what they want. How long has this been happening? Couple of years from what I hear. Started small, just 1 or 2 trucks. Now it's bigger. More locations, more of them. Has anyone tried to confront them? Figure out what's going on? He looked at me like I was crazy. A few guys tried. One driver said he knocked on the window of one of the trucks. The person inside just stared at him. Didn't react at all. Another guy called the cops on them. By the time police arrived, the trucks were gone. But here's the thing. The cops checked the security footage, and the trucks were never there. The footage showed empty parking spaces where the trucks had been. I haven't been able to verify that story, but I also haven't forgotten it. 2 nights ago, I had a delivery in Des Moines and stopped at a Pilot truck stop to sleep. I deliberately chose a spot near the building under bright lights, surrounded by other trucks, with drivers I could see moving around inside. I woke up at 3 a.m. to complete silence. No engine sounds, no movement. I looked out my window. Every truck in the lot had their headlights on, and in every cab, someone was sitting in the driver's seat, facing forward, perfectly still, including the truck I'd parked next to, a truck that had been empty when I went to sleep. I started my engine and pulled out as fast as I could. As I drove toward the exit, I checked my mirrors one more time. All of the figures had turned to face my direction, watching me leave. This morning I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo taken from inside a truck cab, looking out at a parking lot. I recognized it immediately. The Flying J in North Platte, where this all started. My truck was in the photo, parked in the same spot I'd used 4 months ago. But the photo was time-stamped yesterday. I haven't been to Nebraska in 4 months. I called my company to confirm. My truck's GPS showed I was in Iowa yesterday, exactly where I was supposed to be. But in the photo, it's definitely my truck. My license plate, my company logo, and in the driver's seat, there's a figure sitting perfectly still, facing forward. I zoomed in on the photo, trying to see the face. It's too dark to make out clearly, but the figure is wearing the same jacket I'm wearing right now.